pod with, frequently.
Of course. That's how it always works, dude. We're going to try. Well, I hope this works.
Yeah. If it doesn't work, then I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I know you sound okay. I just let's, I want to, and you've turned off everything else in the house that sucks internet.
Yeah. Everything is off from the internet.
Oh no.
Hold on. There we go. You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't have the mic thing turned on, and I plugged in the mic.
Woof. Okay. So
we have to start. I'll just start from the top 10 rookies, right? Or start from Ronald Jones. Where you?
Yeah. I asked you about Ronald Jones. Yeah. Start from there.
Having Ronald Jones later in my top 10 doesn't say as much about Ronald Jones as it does the other guys above him, and more so just there's a large chunk of guys that I'm fine with taking any of them. So if I'm in that 2 to 4 range, before I go after a Ronald Jones, I'm more apt to try and trade down to that 109 to 111 range. And for the most part, because people like Ronald Jones a lot, he's not falling to that range, so I'm not ending up with a ton of shares at that 9 to 10 range.
You're totally freezing.
I'm not talking right now.
Oh, okay.
Because my experience from recording with you is you always have like a pause, so I wasn't sure.
No, I know, but my experience from tonight is that there's a lot of freezing. So yeah, that was funny. So yeah, that's the move, man. That's the move. Is trade down as far. My move in rookie drafts is to trade down as far as I can and still get Royce Freeman comfortably. If I can't get Rashad Penny, I'll trade down a few spots and just pick up Royce Freeman, knowing that the Sony Michels and the Ronald Jones and the Kerryon Johnsons will likely go ahead of Royce Freeman. And the reason is always draft capital. And with Royce Freeman, I believe that landing position is more indicative of his future performance, of his value. Landing position was so critical for Royce Freeman to land on an offense where the only competition is Devontae Booker and D'Angelo Henderson. That's huge. Also to land on an offense with a good but not great offensive line, at least a capable offensive line, and an ascending offense that's going to move the ball up and down the football field with a huge upgrade at quarterback in Case Keenum. So for me, that was one of the best landing positions. That was one of the places I was considering. I thought that Saquon Barkley could land. It was possible that if the Giants did not draft Saquon Barkley, he could fall to the Broncos, and I wanted to see him on the Broncos. It was one of my favorite landing spots, if not what I thought the optimal landing spot for Saquon Barkley. So if that's where I wanted Saquon Barkley to land, of course I love Royce Freeman knowing that's where he landed. And I can't draft Kerryon Johnson ahead of Royce Freeman just because Kerryon Johnson was drafted around earlier. Would you?
No, and the thing with running backs is that more so than with wide receivers, you have to look at the immediate situation that they're put in. And Kerryon Johnson's going to be splitting time with Amir Abdullah, Theo Riddick, and LeGarrette Blount. So there's plenty of ways for Kerryon Johnson to lose touches early in his career. Devontae Booker is terrible. Royce Freeman is going to have the bulk share of those carries, as well as targets coming out of the backfield in that Broncos offense. So I'm fine dipping a little lower in the draft. I am in, you say it's draft capital. Everyone knows it. I preach it and I practice it as well. But if it's a round difference and the situations are that different, I'm fine with taking the better situation with the less capital.
Right, and not all rounds are created equal. The first round and the second round There's a big difference between the first round and the second round. There's also a big difference between the fourth round and the fifth round. I talked to Josh Norris about this on the Roto Underworld program earlier in the week. There is a distinct difference between day 2 and day 3. Rounds 5, 6, and 7 are typically flyers, not guaranteed roster spots. If you get drafted in the fourth round, you're guaranteed a roster spot. If you get drafted in the first round, you're guaranteed playing time. Unless it's Brashad Perriman and he gets hurt. But even Kevin White received playing time even though he was overmatched. Why? Because he was a top 10 pick. So there's not a lot of difference between the second and the third round. There's actually less difference between the second and the third round than there is the fourth round and the fifth round. So when you're talking about draft capital, you just can't look at the number of slots difference. The actual round the player was drafted in matters. And this is something that I'm only coming to realize now.
Yeah, and it's also key to realize where they are drafted in the round, or kind of expected to go, and how that relates to their ADP. Well, the example of Darius Geis, people had him as the number 2 running back in the class, and many people still do from a fantasy perspective, but then he goes as the 7th running back off the board at the end of the second round. And I think that should cause us have a cause for concern, because when we have a guy that we thought would go in the first round and dips all the way to the end of the second, that means that there are concerns. And some people say, oh, well, if it's just a character concern, I'm not concerned with it. But there's no way to know. That's the reason why we don't know that there's 31 teams.
Concerns about his game. There could be flaws in his game that the coaches picked up or the scouts picked up that we don't perceive. It's bold arrogance to think that our grades of players heading into the draft are final and not recalibrate them based on where they were drafted. The fact that Rashad Penny was drafted almost a round earlier, and not just 30 slots earlier, he was drafted in the first round as opposed to the second round, and that difference, that distinction is important. It's important enough to take 2 players that were already similar. They were already on our Mount Rushmore of running backs in the 2018 class, and it creates a conversation now. Who's the number 2 back in this class? Is it Geis or is it Freeman? And if you say it's Freeman because he landed in Seattle with Russell Wilson, he gets to enjoy the Alfred Morris corollary as well as the first-round draft capital and the guaranteed touches that it comes with, then I understand that. I can't decide. Luckily, I don't have the number 2 pick in any draft, so I don't have to make that painful decision. But for me, it's right down the middle. We have them adjacent on both our rookie rankings on playerprofiler.com/player-rankings, as well as our overall dynasty rankings. There we have Penny, Geis, Penny. It's razor close.
Yeah, and when we talk about trading down from that 102 spot, now is not the time to trade down from the 102. Hopefully, if you had the 102, you traded down from it when Geis was the locked in. He's the greatest thing since sliced bread after Barkley. Right. That was the time to trade the 102.
Wow, you hit us with a nice cliche there with the sliced bread cliche. That really took me back, Nathan.
Cliches out of the yin yang. Is that another cliche? Who knows?
The greatest thing since sliced bread. Can you imagine that once upon a time, people marveled at sliced bread and how great that was?
I mean, it's pretty great. Have you ever had it?
It is. I mean, bread is good. I do like bread. I try to cut down on the gluten now, but I do enjoy a good bread. So of these second-round backs, we look at Nick Chubb, look at Ronald Jones. We talked about Kerryon Johnson. It's not Kerryon Johnson, but for you, looking at your rankings, you'd rather have Nick Chubb than Ronald Jones. Why?
I would rather have Nick Chubb than Ronald Jones from a dynasty perspective because I think he's the better talent. He went earlier in the draft. He's going to, and you and Evan Silva had a podcast earlier in the year about the Browns and, how they have a bright future, even if their management's trying to screw it up at the moment. But
right. They're dysfunctional at the moment, and that matters for this season.
Right. But with Nick Chubb, his short-term situation, it doesn't look great because Duke Johnson's going to get all the receiving targets. and Carlos Hyde will get some running work as well. So there's a reason to fade Nick Chubb in redraft, but I think his superior talent to his counterparts of Kerryon Johnson, Ronald Jones. I think that from a long-term dynasty perspective, he wins that Cleveland job and ends up being, an RB1 type in the NFL. But if we're talking from a redraft perspective, Ronald Jones is the winner on day 2 of the draft because he goes to a Tampa Bay offense that looks like it could be one of the best offenses in the NFL with Jameis Winston, Mike Evans, O.J. Howard, all these ascending young talents.
Amazing.
And there's absolutely nothing in the backfield. I know we might talk about your affinity for Peyton Barber in a little bit, but I don't see
Peyton Barber is still a replacement level grinder, but a replacement level grinder in that system is a value if you can get him at the end of drafts, of course.
Sure, but for the most part, Ronald Jones is putting himself in a situation where he's going workhorse type back in that Tampa Bay offense, an offense that's going to scoring, put situations to have red zone touchdowns. As Ronald Jones has the best combination of short-term upside with his offense as well as draft capital being drafted in the early second round.
Ronald Jones could easily outscore Nick Chubb this season, but longer term, which is why you prefer draft capital over landing position, longer term in Dynasty, Nick Chubb should rise and eventually supplant Ronald Jones in most Dynasty rankings, because the case for Ronald Jones is that he was a precocious talent, that he was an early breakout, and that because he broke out so early and that he was dominating linebackers and defensive backs, the next level and the second level, who were years older than him. So at age 18, he was a starting running back in the Pac-10 for one of the country's signature programs. That's important. Breakout age is important, not just for wide receivers, but also for running backs. Well, guess what? When Nick Chubb was a true freshman, he ran for over 1,500 yards, 7.1 yards per carry. And then, oh, by the way, 14 touchdowns and 18 receptions and 213 receiving yards. So over 1,700 all-purpose yards, 16 total touchdowns at 18 years old. That's who Nick Chubb is. That illuminates Nick Chubb's upside at the next level. And that's why today I drafted Nick Chubb in another rookie draft. I'm sitting at the 106. Nick Chubb happens to fall to me because it's a super flex or it's a 2-quarterback league. Thank you very much. Check, please.
Yeah, I think it's a solid value at that 106 spot. But yeah, Nick Chubb, he's a guy that you're going to have to wait on because of the backfield situation that he's in. And also the Browns, while we like some of the weapons around them, they're still going to be a bad team and be trailing. So Duke Johnson's going to get a monster amount of touches this year.
Right. Duke Johnson is the value in that backfield. And longer term, it's going to be the Nick Chubb show, and I'm excited to see it. Nick Chubb in 2019 is going to be bananas, but when we're doing our redraft projections and our draft kit is about to be released, it's very exciting. Looking at these redraft projections by Peter Howard, look at Jameis Winston. Look at the attempts that he's projected to command this season. Jameis Winston is projected to be one of the most prolific passers in the league. He will be the volume-fueled gunslinger quarterback of the NFL. So many of you on Patreon, patreon.com/Podfather, asking me, Podfather, who is the next NFL gunslinger? The heir to Jay Cutler. Jameis Winston is a gunslinger plus. He is a gunslinger now with the opportunity to continue to develop and grow and one day become efficient. It's a gunslinger plus. I would love to own Jameis Winston in a dynasty league. He is going to be a star. He's not. We think of Jameis Winston as a star in football. He's not. He hasn't been a star since he was at Florida State, winning a national championship. I think he can become an NFL star, an NFL superstar this season. And you want as many of these pieces on the Tampa Bay offense as you can get. My problem is One of them in particular is too expensive, and that's Mike Evans. Is Mike Evans the most overrated wide receiver in all of Dynasty leagues?
No, Mike Evans is not the most overrated wide receiver in all of Dynasty leagues.
He's not?
No, not at all.
Is he at least do you believe he should be drafted in the first round of Dynasty leagues?
Yes, I think
Dynasty startups.
I think he's in the clear top 3 tier of OBJ, Hopkins, Evans. I think that if you're taking
what?
Yes.
What? Wait, he's in the top tier of NFL wide receivers?
Yes, he may not put up
with
the amount
DeAndre
of
Hopkins.
Yes, with DeAndre Hopkins, he may not put up the short-term points that you look at from an Antonio Brown, but he is at such a young age and such a young offense that he's going to be a wide receiver 1 for the next 5, 6, 7 years. And I'll sacrifice the little points off that I get for not taking Antonio Brown, and I'll take Mike Evans in that top 3 of a dynasty startup.
So you would draft Mike Evans in a dynasty startup over Antonio Brown?
Absolutely.
Absolutely?
Yeah.
Your answer to that is absolutely? As if like with a dismissive wave? As if get out of here with that silly question?
Well, Matt, we've done this dance before, so
I know. I just can't get my head around it. Every year, his catch rate checks in well below 60%. In 2016, his yards per target was 7.7 outside the top 50. Last year, it was 7.4 outside the top 50. Last year, a negative 17.8 target premium, which factors out quarterback play. So just comparing Jameis Winston's, just comparing Mike Evans per target production to the other Tampa Bay passers, to the other receivers in that Tampa Bay passing game, negative 17.8% outside the top 90. His production premium, his fantasy points above or below expectation, essentially, negative 7.1. You can't check in below expectation every year and dismiss it as bad luck, as variance. Eventually, negative production premiums and negative target premiums year over year over year, and you become your efficiency. Mike Evans looks to me like the quintessential NFL compiler. This is not a wide receiver I would trust in the first round of a dynasty startup.
See, for me, Mike Evans is a guy that's always been force-fed the ball, and that has been to his benefit in fantasy football because targets equal points for the most part. But I think that when you start to get the targets around him, some other players, and his targets decrease, his efficiency will increase with the decrease in targets because Winston won't be forced to throw every single pass, every third down pass, every red zone pass to Mike Evans. So you put in a Chris Godwin and a Deshaun Jackson maybe playing a little better, and of course Justin Watson and Adam Humphries. As the weapons get better around him, he's going to lose targets, which is bad for fantasy. But the efficiency will increase because he won't just be getting every single pass from Winston. It won't be just flying ducks like, okay, I got to get it to Winston now. Because when there's other options around them, the quality of target will increase.
Well, in 2016, he did lead the NFL in targets and target share. 171 targets, 30% target share. And he had a positive production premium and a positive target premium. Only a 2.3% drop rate that season. And he was number 1 in air yards, one of the most predictive metrics year to year for wide receiver fantasy production. So I get it. I get the case for Mike Evans that he's been force-fed bad targets, inaccurate targets, and he's just doing the best he can with those targets. I cannot detangle where the Jameis Winston inefficiency starts and the Mike Evans inefficiency begins. That's the crux of my problem. If I could cordon off a percentage of Mike Evans' inefficiency and attribute it to Jameis Winston, I would. And that would provide a window into Mike Evans' true efficiency. We just don't have that luxury in this particular sport, in football. The quarterback and the wide receiver are inexorably linked. So from what I've seen from Mike Evans, he hasn't been good enough to justify a first-round pick in a startup. That's just it. The risk with Mike Evans is that he's not good enough. You can't draft a wide receiver who has been relatively inefficient throughout his career in the first round of a dynasty startup. Too much is at stake. Too much is at stake.
I don't think too much is at stake. He just signed the long-term extension, showing that the Bucs have faith in using him as that long-term wide receiver one. They'll continue to give him all of these targets. And from a short-term perspective, for both Winston and Evans, so often we talk about targeting players who have been injured the year before. And I think that kind of doubles when it's a player that was injured and still playing. Jameis Winston, he only missed 3 games last year, but he had an injured shoulder, an injured throwing shoulder, for about 4 or 5, 6 more of those games. And so that heavily decreased his efficiencies. So when Winston returns healthy in 2018, that will help both Winston be more efficient as well as Evans, along with, the added targets.
What about the competition for targets? It was different when Mike Evans was the only option in the passing game. In 2016, there were times when the only alternative for Jameis Winston was Adam Humphries. But this year, there's a healthy Deshaun Jackson. We now have a more polished and well-rounded Chris Godwin. We have O.J. Howard coming off one of the most efficient seasons by a tight end last season. Suddenly, Jameis Winston has a wealth of options. And the idea that Mike Evans is going to receive 150 targets is fiction. So now you're hoping, as you mentioned earlier, for efficient Mike Evans to emerge. But we have no evidence that efficient Mike Evans exists. This is theoretical. So now we're drafting Mike Evans in the first round of a dynasty startup based on a theoretical player that we've never seen play. Someone who can convert 140 targets into wide receiver 1 numbers. I've never seen that Mike Evans play in a football field. How do we know he actually exists?
Well, you just cited that 2 years ago he did have the positive production premiums and the positive numbers. So
it was positive. It wasn't good. He still had the low yards per target. It's not like he was at an Antonio Brown, DeAndre Hopkins level of efficiency. Absolutely not. It just wasn't negative. It just wasn't league bottom, Nathan. I was throwing you. I was giving you something to work with.
And I worked with it.
You did. I'm just because I'm a good host. That's what I do, right? I will. Yes, I will offer you counterpoints. Right? I will broaden the base of information. Some of it includes, and it doesn't always have to. And all the information won't always. My goal is not to cherry pick information that supports my argument. My goal is to tell the full story, to zoom out on the full profile. And yes, sometimes particular data points will help the counter argument. But if it's me and I have the option of drafting a first round wide receiver, a young ascending wide receiver on an ascending offense, and I have the opportunity to draft a young, productive wide receiver on an ascending offense, You know who I'm going to draft? Stephon Diggs. Because Stephon Diggs has demonstrated NFL efficiency in a way that Mike Evans never has. So to me, Stephon Diggs has a higher floor than Mike Evans. So give me Stephon Diggs in those early rounds when the stakes are at their highest.
I like that take a lot. I'm a big Diggs fan. But the one counterpoint to that would be, yes, there's Deshaun Jackson and Chris Godwin opposite of Mike Evans, but I think Thielen takes away more targets in that Vikings offense than any of Evans' counterparts.
Just wait for Chris Godwin to break out this year. And you're going to be conflicted because you're a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan and you want to see Chris Godwin succeed, but you also own all the Mike Evans that exists in dynasty leagues. And he's going to cannibalize Mike Evans' targets. You will be so conflicted this season with every Chris Godwin reception, Nathan. I can't wait.
Well, don't worry, because I have Chris Godwin on a bunch of dynasty teams too. So,
there it is. Yes, we can celebrate Chris Godwin together. High fives across the internet service. I cannot wait for this to happen. It is going to happen. I can tell you right now, definitively. I don't do a lot of definitive takes on this show. Well, yes, I do. But I can tell you definitively, Chris Godwin will break out in 2018. Book it. Write it down. I don't care. You don't have Google Keep installed on your phone? Write yourself an email. Get out a pen. Get out a pencil. Write it down on a piece of paper. Don't have a piece of paper? That's fine. Go outside. Maybe it's snowing. Write it in pee in the snow. I don't care. Just write the name Chris Godwin. Now let's go back to Dynasty rookie drafts, because that was a fun divergence. But I need to ask you about fourth round dart throws, because this is the question that dominates our Patreon forums. Again, patreon.com/podfather. Talk to me about your dynasty team. I care about it if you ask these questions on Patreon. Give me your favorite fourth round running back to draft in dynasty rookie drafts.
My favorite fourth round running back is Nyheim Hines. He is the highest drafted of the fourth round running backs.
That's he's entering the best situation. To me that you would default to draft capital.
I mean, when you have the combination of the draft capital, the highest
and
one
the
drafted,
landing position,
and the landing spot of going to an Andrew Luck offense, and obviously a lot of pretty much every Colts fantasy player is kind of reliant on the return of Andrew Luck. But the one thing with Hines that he doesn't necessarily need the Colts offense to be good to be a fantasy contributor early on, because he's so good in the passing game that when Jacoby Brissett is leading that offense, they're going to be losing games. And so we talked about Duke Johnson in Cleveland, putting Nyheim Hines in Indianapolis, and he gets that passing down work. When it's 3rd and 8 every other down, he's going to get plenty of work in those scenarios.
Do you play in fantasy leagues with contracts?
Some, yeah.
Would you sign Nyheim Hines to a 4-year contract?
No, I would not. I have a very strict nothing more than 2-year on day 3 picks.
That's right. So your rule of thumb is if you're a day 3 pick, you're drafted outside the 3rd round, pretty much all running backs after Royce Freeman, you will not sign them to anything more than a 2-year deal.
Correct.
And this is a rule of thumb that you can implement on Reality Sports Online. This is a tactic that most fantasy gamers would never use because they don't bother using Dynasty League platforms with contracts. This is the beauty of Reality Sports Online, that you're not only thinking about who to draft, you're also considering how many years you want to sign that player to. And then in the offseason, You can extend certain players. Like last year, I picked up Trey Burton in free agency, and I immediately signed him to an extension. I have that opportunity. I also, for whatever reason, drafted Charles Sims, another Tampa Bay Buccaneer. I thought he was better than he actually is. So I packaged Charles Sims in a trade for another player. I had to give up more because I was essentially overpaying my trade partner to take on this Charles Sims contract. These are the additional dynamics these are the fun, interesting, and engaging dynamics that you enjoy on the Reality Sports Online platform that most other dynasty leagues simply do not offer. So go to Reality Sports Online now, and when you sign up for a league or team, use the promo code Underworld and get 10% off. Why? Because fantasy just got real at Reality Sports Online. So at what point are you considering drafting DJ Moore in drafts?
DJ Moore, I'm considering him around that 6th spot after Nick Chubb, Rashad Penny, and Darius Geis.
So you would go DJ Moore over Royce Freeman?
Absolutely, yeah.
Why?
Because draft capital, a first-round wide receiver is going to be better than a third-round running back in my book every single time. And obviously it's not going to work out perfectly every time.
Even Calvin Ridley?
Kareem Hunt burned people. But yes, I'll still take Calvin Ridley over Royce Freeman as well.
You would draft Calvin Ridley over Royce Freeman. Now, this is where we disagree because I believe you need to use rookie drafts to replenish your running back core. Most running back production occurs between age 21 and age 25. This is when the running back is on their rookie contract in the NFL. This is when the running back is on your Dynasty League rookie contract. So it would make sense to stockpile your Dynasty League team with as many rookie running backs as possible. We're incentivized to draft rookie running backs in Dynasty Leagues, and we're disincentivized to draft rookie wide receivers because the vast majority of rookie wide receivers lose value from year 1 to year 2. Look back through time at the first round wide receivers in Dynasty Leagues. Go all the way back to 2015. We're not counting 2014. We'll ignore 2014 because that was an outlier draft year. That was an outlier draft class. Start with 2015. Only Will Fuller has improved his Dynasty League value since he was drafted. He's the only first-round wide receiver to actually accrue value. The others have all become less expensive over time. So I'd prefer to draft those players as post-hype players years later. Don't draft Devontae Parker. Trade for him this year in his final opportunity to break out. Don't draft Will Fuller. Trade for him last summer. On the verge of enjoying a massive quarterback upgrade. You don't need to draft DJ Moore in the first round this year. You can always trade for him next year. That's why I'm pushing the button on Royce Freeman.
Yeah, there's certainly a risk involved with that strategy, though, because you can certainly miss out on the breakouts of the 2014 class. All of those guys were more expensive following their rookie year. Amari Cooper, which was 2015, not 2016. Amari Cooper obviously gained value.
Less expensive now. He has declined in value.
Now, but he
has declined in value since his draft. He was drafted either at either the 101 or the 102. You can now receive a 101 or 102 draft pick for Amari Cooper in Dynasty Leagues across the board.
But 12 months from his draft date, he was more expensive than he was on his draft date, was my point.
the wide receiver position is both volatile year to year and often takes time and often takes extra years. And the wide receivers often take extra time, extra years, like the tight end position, to ramp up and become fully operational at the NFL level. See Devin Funchess, see first-round pick Nelson Aguilar. That's the norm. Will Fuller is the exception. This is why I'm drafting running backs. Royce Freeman is going to outproduce DJ Moore this year in fantasy football, whether he was drafted in the first round, second round, or third round. He's going to the Denver Broncos, where he will be the locked-in workhorse back in week 1, because you mentioned it. The only other running backs on that depth chart are Devontae Booker and D'Angelo Henderson. And these are replacement level at best NFL backs. Devontae Booker is a satellite back plus. I was wrong about Devontae Booker. I thought Devontae Booker was better than he's turned out to be at the NFL level because he was such a late breakout. These older running backs can fool you because they end up looking more productive and athletic playing football against younger defensive linemen, linebackers, and defensive backs. Devontae Booker was 23 years old when he was posting a 40% dominator rating at Utah. That matters. If you were posting a 40% dominator rating at age 19 at USC, different story. So no, Devontae Booker is not a threat, is not a long-term threat or even a short-term threat to Royce Freeman. And I've had the option of drafting DJ Moore. And even in leagues where I don't need running back, I'm incentivized to draft Royce Freeman because my primary goal is to accrue value from one year to the next. I believe Royce Freeman will provide more fantasy points this season to help me win championships, as well as accrue trade value headed into 2019. And I love DJ Moore. You know I'm Mr. DJ Moore. I can't believe you made me do this, Nathan. You made me argue against drafting DJ Moore. This breaks my heart, man. Talk about feeling conflicted. Damn you. But this takes us to dynasty startups. So if this is the case in dynasty startups, that you'd prefer to draft post-hype wide receivers, older wide receivers that have experience in the league, are fully formed, fully developed professionals. Well, those receivers are available in rounds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to round 20. Not so with the running back position. That's why in startups, I'm more likely to draft running backs in the early rounds than I am wide receivers. What about you?
I tell you what, we are not agreeing much today. Shocker of the century, but I am a zero RB.
Shocker of the century.
I am a zero RB guy when it comes to startups, and even more so now with kind of the reinvigoration of the running back position and all these guys going early in startups. 17 running backs are going in the top 40 startups right now. Just a couple years ago, there was 7 or 8 guys going in the top 40. So with so many running backs going early, that creates so much value at the wide receiver position in the 3rd and 4th rounds. And it can even make a case for, you maybe go early with a Zeke or a David Johnson. But either way, that 3rd, 4th, 5th round is going to have so many good wide receivers because of the amount of running backs going early that's why I tend to go zero RB, just load up at the wide receiver position, especially in those middle, 3rd to 6th rounds where that's where you take advantage of all those people taking running backs.
Here's a recent draft that I conducted The Roto Underworld Minion Army startup. With the 7th overall selection, I picked Le'Veon Bell. With the 18th selection, I selected Leonard Fournette. And then I went other positions afterward. But I started with my 2 workhorses, and then I built out from there. Agree or disagree with that strategy?
It's certainly one way to make sure that your team is a win now type of team and getting 2 RB1s. And that's one thing that you can do with Dynasty is that there are teams that are building to win later. And so you can get 2 RB1s on the same team drafting in the top 18 picks. That's something you can't do in redraft. So it's certainly a power move. You just have to hit on your middle round picks with the wide receivers.
It is a power move. What am I doing right now?
You're flexing.
You're flexing. That's right. Those are biceps. Those are powerful biceps for dynasty leagues. Yes. So you love Nyheim Hines. We talked about that. What about those other Colts running backs? Are you more of a Marlon Mack person or a Jordan Wilkins guy if you were stacking Colts running backs? Because that's a great backfield to stack because all those assets are inexpensive.
Yeah, and from that perspective, it would be Wilkins because I don't want to invest too much in this backfield because it's all low ceiling guys that were drafted later in the NFL draft. And so I think Wilkins is definitely cheaper than Marlon Mack at this stage because people liked Mack more so going into the NFL and because he showed some flashes last year. So I will take the more inexpensive Wilkins. But it's one of those situations where I'm fine fading the backfield outside of Hines. But if I'm going to go try and stack it, I'm going to go with the more inexpensive option.
Because at any given time, the Colts could go out and acquire a running back. They vaporize all these guys. They draft a running back in the first couple rounds next season. That's the fear, right? You could have stacked that Denver Broncos backfield last season. Put Booker on your taxi squad and D'Angelo Henderson. Hell, I did it. And then what happened, Nathan? What happened?
They drafted
vaporized by the next NFL draft. Just say goodbye to your Denver Broncos running back. Say goodbye to your replacement level Denver Broncos running back assets. But one of those replacement level assets is still alive, even though the team drafted a running back in the 2nd round. And that's Peyton Barber in Tampa Bay. He's your highest owned player, right? You own more Peyton Barber across fantasy leagues than any other player.
You are confusing me with you.
Oh, is that? Shit, you're right. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I misread that. I own Peyton Barber. I got to find a way I'm going to break into this and find a way to edit it.
You can. All you got to do is put it into what you call Audacity.
All right. Well, I'm going to edit the shit. Fuck it. My highest owned player is Peyton Barber because I believe that there are short yardage touchdowns to be had in Tampa Bay, and I think he's the guy. Ronald Jones is 210 pounds at best. And he does not fit the profile of an NFL bell cow at that size. Enter Peyton Barber. Who about you? What about you? Who's your highest owned player across all leagues?
My highest own is Kenyon Drake, and that was from a lot of investments from last season because I saw him as a guy who I wasn't afraid of Jay Ajayi last year, and the guy who had high draft capital during his draft year, struggled in year 1, and pretty much no one valued him last offseason, so I tried to pick him up for virtually free, and I obviously benefited from that as they traded Jay Ajayi. And as we enter this year, I think there's still room to benefit from that. They spent a lower round pick on Kalen Ballage, but Drake is the guy. It's weird because he wasn't even a guy who profiled as a between the tackles guy entering the NFL, but he's definitely the best between the tackles guy the Dolphins have on their roster.
It's amazing. He is the signature enigmatic running back in the NFL today. Kenyon Drake. I don't know what to make of him. That's why I don't have any. You love Kenyon Drake. You have all this Kenyon Drake. I don't have any. but that's the case for draft capital. That's the case for being just this cool, clinical draft capital connoisseur. You can go out and look at the landscape, see a second rounder available everywhere for nothing, and gobble it all up. I love it. You know who else has draft capital? Devin Funchess. Did you know, Nathan, that once upon a time, Devin Funchess was a second-round pick? But he's treated like he was undrafted. Is there a wide receiver in the NFL more disrespected right now than Devin Funchess? Marcus Mosher thinks he's going to lose his job to DJ Moore this season. What are you talking about, Marcus? Love you, Marcus. Is anyone more disrespected than Devin Funchess?
Devin Funchess is heavily disrespected.
He is, right?
He falls on the scenario of there's the people like you and me who love him and will shout it to the heavens. And then there's the people who think he's not an NFL wide receiver. So there's definitely both ends of the spectrum there. But one guy that I'm seeing hated on every end of the spectrum is Dez Bryant. And maybe that's because he's not on an NFL team right now. And that could play a part in it. But this is a guy that has had several wide receiver 1 seasons in his NFL career, a guy that isn't done. He's still going to be a very good NFL wide receiver, a very good fantasy wide receiver. But people are trading him for second-round rookie picks. I am a rookie pick bonanza, and I'm not trading Dez Bryant for a second-round rookie pick. Are you crazy?
They're crazy. They are crazy. If you're out there doing that, you're crazy. And you should seek help. There's plenty of help out there. Go get help, people. We haven't talked at all about tight ends. Let's talk about tight ends briefly. Just give us a sleeper tight end. Let's just cut right to the chase. Give us a couple sleeper tight ends.
All right, we're gonna go really deep here, and we're gonna go with Washington Redskins Jeremy Sprinkle. When it comes to there's the post. We're currently, for the most people, we're in the post rookie draft season, and during that time, I look at guys that are free agents, guys that weren't drafted in the top 4 or 5 rounds of the rookie drafts. And I look at, surprising, I know, I look at draft capital. I look who's on the waiver wire that was drafted fairly high. And 5th round pick isn't fairly high for a guy you want to invest a rookie pick in. But 5th round for Jeremy Sprinkle is fairly high for a guy that was free post rookie drafts. And a year later, he's free again because nobody has, stashed him anywhere unless it's a 30-32 roster league. So I'm all about Jeremy Sprinkle. It takes some time for tight ends to develop. He had like 1 catch for 1 touchdown last year. But we all know Jordan Reed and his injury history. And so there is plenty of opportunity for Sprinkle if an injury happens to, come into that situation with the Washington Redskins. And we know Alex Smith loves himself some tight ends with Travis Kelce. Sprinkle's
going
not
back
Kelce.
to Vernon Davis in San Francisco.
Yes. So,
Alex Smith loves the tight end.
Yeah, so if he loses Reed to injury, I think that he'll find a way to get the ball in Jeremy Sprinkle's hands.
You know why fantasy gamers don't respect Jeremy Sprinkle, right?
Because of his name.
Because of his name. He's fucking Sprinkle. No one wants a guy named Sprinkle on their fantasy team. Let's do some contrived dichotomies. For your dynasty bench, Jamal Williams or Aaron Jones?
Just so I'm clarifying, are we talking just straight up or are we talking based on price?
Just straight up. There's a big difference in price between Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones?
There isn't a big difference, but one is more expensive, and I don't
Jamal
have
Williams
a preference.
Is more expensive?
No, Aaron Jones is more expensive.
He is?
So, yes.
I thought people loved Jamal Williams. I thought Jamal Williams was more heavily respected in dynasty leagues. No?
No. People see Aaron Jones as the guy who's going to get the carries. And it's a funny thing because with satellite backs and with, in PPR leagues, players that are going to get the targets are often undervalued because they're like, oh, he's not going to get the carries. Even if Jamal Williams doesn't get the carries in Green Bay, he's going to get the out of the backfield targets. So I prefer Williams from a price perspective, but Jones, because he's the safer guy who's going to get the carries, straight up, I'll take Jones.
I'm not even sure that's right. Aaron Jones is a better receiver than Jamal Williams, and Jamal Williams profiles closer to a between the tackles grinder than Aaron Jones. I wouldn't be surprised if Jamal Williams has more carries than Aaron Jones, more touchdowns than Aaron Jones this season, but they have equivalent fantasy points because Aaron Jones commands significantly more targets and receptions in PPR leagues. It's close for me. I want Aaron Jones because I think Aaron Jones is a better football player, but for 2018, it's a toss-up. Now, James Conner or Jalen Samuels?
I'll go with Jalen Samuels here. I think that he's the better weapon. James Conner, he was unimpressive in his first year, and it's kind of the mean thing to say of it. Like, we haven't seen much from him since he returned from cancer. So I'm not aboard the James Conner bandwagon. And Matt, you're looking at me like you dissed the guy for coming back from cancer, but it is what it is.
I love you, man. I love you. You've been away from the show too long. I love it. Yes, that's a problem. James Conner has not been himself since he came back from cancer. That's true. It's a true statement. And he's not as versatile as Jalen Samuels. He never has been, never will be. Jalen Samuels' versatility gives him the edge. Bo Scarborough or Rod Smith?
I'll go with Bo Scarborough here. I think that he's the better back. And this is one of those situations where I'm more so looking for the handcuff, and I think that neither of these guys are relevant without a Zeke injury, and I think Scarborough is more likely to get the workhorse-type carries if Zeke were to get hurt.
This is where having a Dallas Cowboys insider on the Sonic Truth podcast pays dividends. Marcus Mosher let us know the Cowboys absolutely love Rod Smith, and they're unsure what Bo Scarborough's role is going to be. The coaches love Rod Smith, and they're trying to find creative ways to use him, even installing some 2 running back sets. The answer is Rod Smith. Now, Terrell Williams or Mike Williams?
This is Mike Williams easily. The only way that it isn't Mike Williams is if the neck problem continues to linger. But if they're both playing on the NFL field, Mike Williams is the better talent, and he's the guy that's going to get the red zone touchdowns in Los Angeles.
This is efficiency versus draft capital. This is the efficiency versus draft capital showdown of all time. Terrell Williams has been efficient year over year in the NFL, which is difficult to do. Efficiency is typically not sticky, but it has been thus far for Terrell Williams, but he's a free agent, right? He's an undrafted free agent. But they did tender him at the second-round level. So at this point in his career, you can treat him like a second-round pick, but that still can't compete with a top 10 pick. That's what Mike Williams is, and that's why you give him the edge. I'm taking Tyrell Williams because I'll take the production I've seen versus the theoretical upside. What about Tyler Boyd versus John Ross?
Well, this is a similar conversation, except for Boyd hasn't shown the Tyrell Williams efficiency.
That's exactly it. You just use my. That's it. Yes. Thank you. You're very good at doing podcasts.
So yes, John Ross. I'm not hugely optimistic coming into this year, but if he's healthy, he'll be better than Tyler Boyd.
I agree. John Ross has the upside. Period. That's it. Tyler Boyd is a low ceiling player, and that's a fact. Josh Doctson or Paul Richardson?
This one is really, really close. I think
it is very close for me too.
Yeah, from a redraft perspective, at least. And I think that if you're going for the upside, it's Doctson. If you're going for the floor, it's Richardson. So I didn't answer the question there. So Doctson, but I think that both right answers are right.
Well, I had the option of drafting either in this recent startup, and I went Doctson, and then I followed it up with Paul Richardson because I do like to stack wide receivers in Dynasty, particularly wide receivers in ambiguous roles. We don't know what role Josh Doctson will play in an Alex Smith offense, and we don't know what role Paul Richardson will play in an Alex Smith offense. Josh Doctson has the size and athleticism. Paul Richardson has the $40 million contract. Both give them upside, and both are relatively safe. But I think you're exactly right. I think that Josh Doctson's upside is slightly higher. Paul Richardson is slightly safer. But once you already have your starting lineup set in a dynasty startup, you might as well chase the upside. That's why I went with Josh Doctson. Corey Coleman also has upside. That's a first-round pick. That's draft capital. Is he the wide receiver version of Kenyon Drake for you?
Yes, absolutely, except for I invested at the 103, 104 rookie draft price, which hurt because I couldn't go buy low because I already had him.
Where do you want to see him land if he gets traded?
Anywhere but Cleveland, because they've decided that Corey Coleman is basically not an NFL wide receiver, which makes me sad. But there are a few nice scenarios.
Because every time I've watched Corey Coleman on a football field, he's making plays, Nathan. He's a splash play specialist. Watch the tape, people. I never say that I never say that, but I'm saying it now. Go watch the tape on Corey Coleman, his NFL tape, not his Baylor tape.
There you go. And speaking of Baylor, I would like Dallas as a landing spot for Corey Coleman. Certainly there's targets available in that wide receiver core. Seattle's another one. And then this is my more so wanting for Sam Darnold, because I am a Sam Darnold enthusiast with his number 3 overall draft pick and going in the 3rd round of rookie drafts. I would love for him to get an NFL wide receiver. He doesn't have one right now. Right now, there's nothing in that Jets wide receiver core. Throw him a Corey Coleman, and I'll be very happy.
Yeah, Corey Coleman immediately becomes the number 1 option in that Jets passing game. That's where I want to see him go. That's brilliant. Corey Coleman to the Jets. Let's make that happen. He stands 5'10", weighs 194 pounds, but because his measurables are so exceptional across the board, 95th percentile burst, 96th percentile agility, his catch radius at 5'10", with 13th percentile arm length, it's still 1029, 92nd percentile. His SparkX score, his overarching athleticism score, Nike's speed, power, agility, reaction, and quickness metric, 130.0, 97th percentile. And oh, by the way, when he was at Baylor, mega producer, 44.2%, 89th percentile college dominator. Very few wide receivers check as many boxes, including first-round draft capital, as Corey Coleman. Get him on a wide receiver depth chart where he can continue to make splash plays as he has throughout his NFL career. Okay, I'll get you out of here on one final Sonic Truth Pod question. Which wide receiver do you qualify for truth or status on? Who is going to be this year's Nelson Agholor?
Well, at first, the answer is, can it be Corey Coleman, please? But that kind of requires a trade. And then we all know that when players get traded.
We just talked about Corey Coleman. Come on. I'm just praising your podcast acumen. And then you go try to call back to a wide receiver we've already talked about when we have hundreds of other wide receivers that we could be analyzing.
Yes, but there's only a certain number of wide receivers that fit this archetype, and since we already talked about the other one, I have to go back. I have to say the one you're.
I haven't looked at the show sheet, but my guess is he wears a purple uniform. Am I correct?
He does wear a purple uniform, and his name
is
Laquan Treadwell.
Love it. Hey, man, I've started to acquire some Laquan Treadwell myself, so I am on board. Why not? The number 3 wide receiver job is wide open. Interesting story. Josh Norris was talking to, I was talking to Josh, as I mentioned, I was talking to Josh Norris on the Roto Underworld pod this past week, and I asked him about undrafted free agents, and he pointed to the Minnesota Vikings and said they have a handful of undrafted free agents, namely Corey Robinson being the most high-profile one from Southern Miss. And his argument for chasing those undrafted free agents on Minnesota was that the wide receiver 3 job for that franchise is wide open. And in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, Josh, this could be the year of Laquan Treadwell. Don't forget, he was drafted in the first round. This was Laquan Treadwell, who at one point in time went to the combine, opted out of most of the drills, and just walked around with a backward hat looking really cool. You have to be an alpha dog to pull. That was some alpha shit he pulled at the combine. I don't even know what I'm talking about. I don't even know. That doesn't even matter. I don't know what that has no relevance to this conversation, but I just thought I'd mention that. Somewhere deep inside him, Laquan Treadwell views himself as an alpha dog receiver. And to me, somehow that matters. Say something.
I was wondering if you wanted that to be the show, but
no, it is the show. We did the, yeah. As soon as you said Laquan Treadwell, that's going to be the show. This is all outtakes at this point.
So okay, this can be in the outtakes. You want to hear my Laquan Treadwell take?
Yes, very much.
So, Saquon Barkley. His name is Saquon, and it's not Saquon. He needs to change his name to Laquan Treadwell instead of Laquan Treadwell.
I'm so glad this is in the outtakes, not the real show.
I came up with that like 2 weeks ago. I was like, you know what? I fixed it. He's got to change his name.
Yeah, he needs to change something, man. Like I said, I think it's a confidence thing. I don't know what it is. And I think that we talk about pumped up slot receivers and who's going to be the next Marquez Colston. Why can't it be Laquan Treadwell? He can't win on the outside. That's been established. That doesn't mean he can't play slot. The new NFL slot receiver is 210 pounds. They can block edge rushers. Laquan Treadwell can crack back those edge rushers and outside linebackers on those outside runs. Play Laquan Treadwell in the slot. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, they got to find
there. No, I'd rather have Laquan Treadwell in the slot than Kendall Wright.
Yeah, they got to find
more versatile.
Yeah, but
that guy can block, man. I know that I know it's crazy to this is where this is how far we've come with Laquan Treadwell. We're starting to compliment his blocking to rationalize away and convince ourselves that to rationalize his ability to stay on the field and convince ourselves that he can somehow become relevant. But it's true. That guy has become a hell of a blocker. And if that's the way to get him on the field, then so be it, man. I don't like to see these guys fail, man. I don't like to see first-round picks fail. It bothers me. There's something about Kevin White where I'm not bothered by it. But with everyone else, John Ross, Laquan Treadwell, Nelson Aguilar, it bothered me to see these guys failing.
That was a good show.
Hey, you know what, man? We found a way.
Yeah, you'll have to chop it together, but
we found a way to do it. Oh, editing is going to be a complete nightmare. I've decided I'm going to edit it. I made too many mistakes. I'm going to edit it. I'm going to bite the bullet and edit it after I've done the draft kit has gone live. I'm just going to eat it and do the editing. But yeah, man. I mean, I love your perspective on shit. People just don't have. There's not a lot of creative thought when it comes to constructing Dynasty League rosters. So it's so refreshing.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like I'm a broken record, though. Anytime I come on your show, we talk about Mike Evans, and then I scream about draft capital every time.
No, but it's not like when we were doing a show together, we did every team. We did team by team breakdown. So we never got caught on any given team. And then you come on the show once or twice a year. People, it's a whole new audience, man. My audience has doubled since the last time you came on. Half the people have never heard you on the show with me before. Isn't that fucking cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, you should never feel like you're lapsing into reruns. Most people are going to be hearing it for the first time. That's like a general rule of radio. Whenever you go on the air, you have to always imagine that you're talking to the new listener and be comfortable giving your most comfortable positions, because those are the ones you're able to deliver the best. And it's funny that your fans or people that subscribe to you for a long time, they're cool with you repeating something. They don't mind hearing it again. They actually like it. It's soothing to them for you to reinforce something that you said before.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, now I'm rambling. Thank you again.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll see you around.